Good afternoon, class, or I guess classes, I should say. My name is John Van Slyke, and I am honored to serve this fall as your uh, World Civ 1 instructor here at Walla Walla Community College. We'll be studying ancient world civilization, and I'm happy to have you on board. I say classes because I'm actually teaching two classes. One is a face-to-face that I'll be meeting each morning at 8:30 in room 208 here on the main campus. The other class is an online class. So for the purposes of my screencast presently, I just want to talk a little bit about history, maybe a little bit about myself as well, and just use this as a kickoff of sorts for both classes. And I will be, as you now know, posting it in the Canvas shells that will be used to help run and facilitate the function of the course this quarter. So welcome. I'm very excited that you're a part of this learning experience this quarter. I'm also honored to be able to serve as your instructor. And it's my hope that we will celebrate and struggle a bit together this quarter as we move through the course. And I am hopeful that as a result of our time together, you're going to take some significant insights from your world, and you're going to have some tools that will allow you to better analyze and better participate in the world in which we inhabit. So with that, welcome, and let's get started. So first off, I want to make a little bit of a case for really the importance of understanding world history. And oddly enough, I'm going to start making that case by saying why you shouldn't be studying history. And there's a couple reasons that come to mind, and these are a couple, I think, explanations that people oftentimes cite for why history is perhaps a waste of their time. And the first is that if you're studying history, by definition, you aren't studying other things. And so by that logic, history is crowding out or preventing you from learning other valuable and, who knows, maybe marketable skills that you could take with you into the future. And I would argue that that's a bit short-sighted. You know, after all, our education is not just designed to make us money. I would argue, far more importantly, it's to make us better people. And so the better rounded we are in our approach to our everyday lives, we become better friends, we become better partners, better spouses, we become better citizens, better coaches, better leaders, those sorts of things. And I would also argue we become better employees as well. Oftentimes that expression is given, don't study history because it'll keep you from not studying other things. And I feel like that misses the all-important issue of why history is helpful. There's also, I think, a lot of reluctance perhaps out there to embrace history because you don't have to hang around with too many historians to realize that history is oftentimes in the eye of the beholder. People can take facts and do with them what they will. And I can't claim to you that I'm going to be a perfectly impartial and a perfectly objective history instructor, but I don't think that that's the point either. I think what history really does is it gives us a wonderful opportunity to be critical thinkers. And as part of being a critical thinker, we're also going to wrestle with and figure out, okay, so if this is what happened, what does that mean? What's the pattern here? What does this tell us about the nature of power? What does it tell us about relationships of trade and economics? What does it tell us about how humans somewhat universally seem to be trying to make meaning out of the world in which they live? And I feel like that critical experiment is very important. It's not so important to know how many horses were in the cavalry of General Robert E. Lee in a Civil War battle. That's really not the level of history, at least that I like to study. But I do like to study, what can we learn, what can we take from this? Or how can we find ourselves in this historical set of developments? Because it's that self-awareness and that self-knowledge that we want to take from this exercise. So I hope that gives you a little sense of where I'm going there. And I mentioned Thomas Jefferson here. Thomas Jefferson is celebrated by many Americans as being one of the foundational thinkers in the early formation of our nation. Of course, he's also complicated. He was a slaveholder, and we're quite confident that he had children with a slave mistress, and these are children that he never owned up to having. So, on some ways, Thomas Jefferson is a person to be celebrated. In other ways, he probably wouldn't live up to many of the sensibilities and expectations that we have for people in the early 21st century. So, welcome to the complex web that is the study of history. Okay, so what will history do for us? Well, first off, history is a process. It's not an outcome. We learn, we become stronger, we become smarter, we become more critical by trying to wrestle with the experience of the past and trying to make sense, trying to find patterns of it, trying to take wisdom out of it. So it's not so critical to me, how well you answer a multiple choice exam. I'm much more interested in how you think about the world, and perhaps you can take a global understanding or a global perspective of the world as a result of participating in this course. Likewise, history shows us what it means to be human. I have a picture here. Some of you maybe recognize this gentleman. He is a Brit. His name is Winston Churchill. And I oftentimes, when I think of World War II, I wonder what it was like for Winston Churchill in 1940, 41, 42, when the outcome of World War II was far from certain. And at times I'm sure it felt like he was the only person or the only leader standing up to Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany in the early goings of World War II. We learned something about courage. We learned something about standing resolved about one's position, and I think we find inspiration there. We'll meet Ahsoka later on in the course, so I'll save him for then. And my question for you is, how do you learn how to deal with hardship, with difficulty? History is powerful there. When we go about our lives and we experience setbacks, we are not the first people to face the problems that we face in our lives. And there's some comfort and some guidance and some example to be found when we look more closely at our history. Next, history improves judgment. I have here General Lee and General McClellan. Those of you who know anything about the American Civil War know that Robert E. Lee was a Confederate general, widely celebrated, perhaps the most skilled military mind in all of American history. That's probably up to debate, but he's definitely up there in the top 3 to 5 for sure. Lee was able to use a lot of illusions and trickery in a number of Civil War battles to really psych out his Union counterpart, General George McClellan, such that McClellan thought there were far more Confederate soldiers than there actually were. And Lee was a gifted and skilled military man, partly because he studied his history incredibly well. And many of the tricks, military tricks that had gone down before, were things that he readily understood and employed in his work during the Civil War. I'm going to spare you my lesson in preparation. I have one that I sometimes share, but it's not that important to our purposes right here. Are there areas where you have benefited, where your judgment is better because of your history? I mean, it could be as simple as if you play chess, maybe you've learned some strategies that are rooted in prior experiences of perhaps losing at chess. But these are ways in which we get better. Our judgment improves. Powerful examples or parallels or metaphors we have in our history, if we look at it closely, the fantastic examples of folks like Martin Luther King Jr. or Mahatma Gandhi. These were very peaceful agitators for change, people who brought about dramatic change in their period of time by tirelessly and in a very disciplined way pursuing objectives and doing it with patience, love, and skill and strategy. And so there are probably times where you might feel like, huh, what would Gandhi do in this instance? Or how would Martin Luther King Jr. Accomplish this challenge? Likewise, the Apollo 11 mission, you probably hear this oftentimes cited by politicians, that, we need a Apollo mission to come up with more sustainable energy forms for our country. We use that as, President Kennedy in the early 1960s cast a very big vision of what the United States could do. And sure enough, by the end of the 1960s, the United States had landed astronauts on the moon. And so that parallel, that metaphor, analogy, is one that's quite strong. Can you think of powerful examples, anything in your life that could benefit from a historical example? I mean, sometimes you may have a difficult day, and perhaps you could find a biography of someone, an important someone in history who experienced similar hardships. Maybe it's raising 3 kids all on your own, or maybe it's recovering from an addiction, or maybe it's from coming out of prison, or maybe it's what someone did after serving in a military conflict overseas. Or maybe it's someone who dealt with social hardship or breakups or a lack of friends, those sorts of things. We can find powerful parallels when we look at history, and that should be something of comfort to us. History makes us better thinkers. Okay, so here, what I mean, in American foreign policy, we've learned a lot of lessons in the last decade or so. What is the proper way? What is the effective way to solve problems that the world faces? Places like Iran, Iraq, in Pakistan, Afghanistan. Right now, the United States is thinking through a strategy for dealing with other unrest in the Middle East, dealing with threats like ISIS or ISIL. So we learn from past mistakes and past successes how to do things better. So a powerful, powerful place, powerful course of study that can only help us and make us better. Okay, and finally, I'm just going to close. History supports common cultural understanding and values. We learn things like how do we deal with situations, even when they're frustrating, and even when we're angry, and even when we've been hurt. Are there some values that should never be compromised or negotiated? Our freedoms of speech, our freedoms of press, our rights to vote, our other freedoms of expression, our protections under the courts, that we will not be tried unless we have, we will be tried, but we will not be found guilty until due process has taken place. There are all sorts of places throughout history where we can reappreciate some of the core values that our culture brings to us and hopefully understand how important they are. So with that, I am going to stop. Again, I'm excited to have you on board. I look forward to the quarter to come. You should not feel hesitant at all to try to reach me if you have questions. And I really do want to support you in becoming part of our conversations that we'll be having this quarter. Thanks. And with that, we'll sign off, and I'll look forward to further contact later.